It's been wild. They're now 5-0 at PPG Paints Arena. It's tough to even describe the opening 13 games of this 2021 NHL season. I'm Matt Gajtka. This is Pittsburgh Sports Live. This is Pittsburgh Postgame. Back with you here after the Penguins pick up a win against their division rival Capitals. An old school Pens Capitals battle with plenty of goals, plenty of offense, and with the Penguins coming out on top, as I said, and now collecting their 7th win of the season. They're back in playoff position. Seems early to talk about that, but not really, in a season that may be even shorter than we thought, depending on how COVID pans out over the course of the next several weeks. Thanks for watching on Pittsburgh Sports Live's YouTube channel, as well as on Pittsburgh Hockey Now's Facebook page and Twitter. We're streaming on all those channels right now, and you can get at us there on the live chat on YouTube as we work our way through the next half an hour or so. That's usually how long these shows go. We'll see how much we had to talk about here. Very entertaining, very interesting game, and the Penguins in a very interesting position overall in their franchise history. Here to help me describe that and talk about where the Pens are is the head coach of the Duquesne Division I ACHA hockey team. His name's Conrad Waite, and if you're a Pittsburgh Sports Live subscriber, you might recall his performance, a close loss in the Pittsburgh Sports Face-Off last spring to Mike Osti of this very channel. Conrad, sorry to bring that up, but thank you for joining me here.
That's okay. It's still a bit of a sore spot with me, but hopefully I'll redeem myself sometime.
Like I said, a close battle. It was a good one. We'll have to have you back on there if we can get that show revved up again in the summertime. And we will talk about your Dukes here and if there is a prospect for a college hockey season for some of the local club teams in the area. But we do want to talk about the Pens. And Conrad, like I said, that felt like an old school Pens Capitals battle back in the Bruce Boudreau years when it was chance for chance. And Tristan Jarry, I think, actually played a pretty darn good game despite giving up the 3 goals here. So we can go there. We can go where the Penguins are right now in terms of the new leadership watching from above, or we can just talk about how darn good Sidney Crosby has been over the first 13 games of the season. He just continues to prove to be ageless here, and he ices this one with the second empty net goal after Zach Aston-Reese got one too. But I think where I want to start with this one, Conrad, is for the first time the Penguins played with a lead going into the third period. Seems impossible, but that was their first experience with that this year. So for once, they didn't have to come back. And I know you can speak to it as a coach. When you're playing with the lead, things are just a little bit more comfortable. You can do more things as a coach, and as a team, you can just act more natural. Did you see that there in the third period tonight?
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen anybody mention this yet, but that was actually the first time all season they've had a 2-goal lead. So
yeah,
fun fact that I think every single person on the internet talked about today. But it was I think you clearly saw between the two teams that the Caps hadn't played in a week. You know, the Penguins haven't been on the ice as much. So you got some of that free-flowing game as you were talking about. But it was interesting seeing the Penguins play with a lead for, one of the first times or to play comfortably, I would say, with the lead going into that third period. And I thought, for not having really been able to do it all season, that they looked pretty good. They shorted up. They didn't give up too many chances in the third period. I actually thought that, Jarry was probably one of the only bad spots for the day, considering the win. But the Penguins did a pretty good job of locking down going into the third, not giving up too many chances and letting.
Pens now with 7 wins at 7-4-1. They're now tied with the Capitals and the Islanders for third place, 3-way tie for third in that East Division, and of course top 4 make the playoffs. So they're right there on that borderline, and it seems like we're seeing some separation a little bit here. It's still going to be a really tight division, I think, the rest of the way. Just checking out the standings, the Devils and Sabres, well, they haven't played in a while. That's part of it too. It's really difficult to gauge where these teams are at, because we may end up having to go by points percentage, points per game by the end of the season, as opposed to just raw point totals. But as of right now, like I said, Caps, Pens, and Islanders tied for third, Flyers in second with 18, and the Bruins on top with 22. And that's about, I think, what we thought the top 5 would look like. Maybe your order would have been a little bit different here. Through 13 games, though, Conrad, do you feel like that the Penguins are the rightful owners of at least a playoff berth at this moment? Or do you feel like this has been a smoke and mirrors type season, because they've barely played with the lead? They've been pretty putrid on the road when it comes to results. And just generally speaking, they've had the look of a one-line team for most of the year.
I think it's been a little bit of both. I think dealing with the injuries, some of that smoke and mirrors it comes up, but the fact that they've been able to win the games and bank the points they need has been good. I think at the end of the year, they're probably going to be right around that 4 spot, most likely the last team in as opposed to the first team out. And I think what you saw today with the third line being a huge factor, causing some momentum change for that first goal. If they can stay healthy, and if the Malkin line, can bring up their game a little bit, I think they go from that one line to a real third line team and threaten to make a move in the playoffs.
What has been the issue with Yevgeny Malkin primarily? Because if he's not, I don't expect him to be at the Crosby level necessarily, but if he's not playing at least a star level here, then the whole concept of the Penguins doesn't work just because of how they've allocated the salary cap and where the percentages are going. Same goes for Chris Letang too, but Malkin does appear to be maybe the guy who's underperforming the most, or at least he had, and today turnover led to Backstrom's goal late in the second period. Really, no excuse for that. Nonchalant in front of his own net. That was a tough one to take. There were also some signs of life, but he's just not where he needs to be. What's missing from Malkin's game, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna get lambasted for that turnover and the goal that resulted for it. I actually thought he played a pretty decent game outside of that moment. It was like you saw him cause a lot of turnovers, be pretty good on the forecheck. Kapanen and Zucker were a little hit or miss, and so I don't think the line played great altogether. But there's been a lot of reports that Malkin wasn't in as great a shape. He's a real emotional player, and so he'll go on hot streaks. He'll be a little cold. Hoping that the goal last game, a little bit better performance today, something that starts bringing him out of that.
From what you've watched of Sidney Crosby over the years, what leads to his consistency? Because he's had some major injuries, and clearly the concussion could have cost him his career. The concussion issues that he had, the multiple ones, we're getting close to 10 years ago for that. Actually, it has been 10 years, believe it or not. But here he is at age 33, and he's the Penguins' best player when you look at shot share when he's on the ice, expected goals. Today, another handful of points, and maybe he's not the best player in the game anymore, but he's defying age at this moment. Hockey's pretty much a young man's game, but he might be the type of guy who can really keep that level going, or at least prevent it from cratering well into his late 30s, and who knows how long he might play. But when you watch him today, does it look like the same player from many years ago, or has he added some things? Has he tinkered with his game to make it more long-lasting as he continues on?
I don't think he has the same pop that he did earlier in his career, but you can't talk about Sidney Crosby without first and foremost talking about his preparation, and I think that's one of the things that has cemented him as one of the best, certainly the best in the game for a significant time, and will keep him good even into his 30s. And that's where you see that just because the legs aren't quite there the same way, or he doesn't have the slick moves that he might have done earlier in his career, surprise defenseman with, that give and go with Matheson is just a good example of the way that he can control the game when he's on the ice. And that's the mental side of things, all of the conditioning work that he does, and then just the way he develops that chemistry with everyone else.
Penguins win at 6-3 over the Capitals. It's Pittsburgh Sports Live, and this is Pittsburgh's postgame. I'm Matt Gajtka with Conrad Waite of Duquesne Hockey. We have some comments on YouTube I want to get to and make sure we recognize the folks who do chime in over there. Underwater Levels joins us, and he commends the Penguins for a strong third period. Says there was some good pesky stick work in there in the defensive zone to help preserve that lead. They hadn't played with the lead. We were talking about how that makes you more comfortable maybe, but you have to get comfortable playing with the lead too. And in fact, a wild stat, like you mentioned, Conrad, they had not had a 2-goal lead on the entire season. They're the last NHL team to have a 2-goal lead in the season until that second period when Jake Gensel put in his own rebound. But prior to that, they had been outscored 9-0 when they carried a lead. So they didn't have a lot of experience playing with it. They hadn't played well with a lead there. Did you see any progress there in that third period? Because if you look at some scoring chance numbers, you look at shot attempts, that was actually their best period. And it's with the Capitals trailing. Usually the trailing team is able to muster that sort of push, but the Penguins more than held their own territorially. So in that third period, do you see anything like if you were coaching the team that you would definitely compliment them on in the post game?
Yeah, well, I think it really played into the Pens' favor with the Caps. Again, coming off of not having played with a week, a lot of times you get worn down. You don't quite have that game speed you want. You get a lot more up and down throughout the game, and Pens took advantage of that in the third. The one thing that I noticed is earlier in the game, especially in the first period, the Pens' defense were playing real aggressive in the neutral zone. Maybe like 2 or 3 times in that first period where Caps were flying through the blue line and a real threaded pass would have sprung them for a breakaway. Then, sure enough, right at the beginning of the second period, we saw that. They were able to do that. In the third, the whole team sat back a little bit more, kind of let the Caps come to them, create the turnovers off that, and then put it back into the offensive zone. Which, again, then you saw that with the empty net goal there at the end. So I think just the entire team's defensive structure, they were able to control in the third and let the Caps kind of sucker the Caps into playing into odd man situations against them.
Let's talk about that decor since you brought it up and how they were posturing at least throughout the course of this game. Chris Letang is still the leader there, but we're seeing some push from a guy like Pierre-Olivier Joseph. John Marino had a rough start here to his sophomore season, but I'm still bullish on his game. And I think Chad Ruedo has taken a nice step up, as did Cody Ceci over the past few games. And then we see Mike Matheson as well. So the decor has evolved over the years here. Some new faces, Jack Johnson out, Justin Schultz out, who we saw on the other side of the ice this afternoon. Do you think this is still at least a playoff caliber defense core, or do the new guys in charge, Brian Burke and Ron Hextall, have to go supplement when they're looking for something here? Because the trade deadline is coming up in just a couple of weeks, actually less than a couple of weeks, by the end of the month.
I thought Letang, it certainly wasn't one of his best games. I don't know if the Pens needed to, but other than him, I thought the 5 other defensemen played great. It was one of my first opportunities to really see Joseph up close. I haven't caught a lot of the games since he's come up, and his, I like his range on the ice, especially as a compliment to a player like Letang. You saw Marino go toe-to-toe against Ovechkin a couple of times throughout the game and match up with him defensively. I thought Cody Ceci, especially in a third pairing role, created a lot for them. And then on the offensive blue line, I think it was the D, especially Matheson. They scored a goal off of it, but I thought it was the defense that was a big key to those offensive zone possessions, being able to jump off the blue line, work them in on the cycle. And I thought, like I said, up and down that the for the group that they had, especially dealing with injuries, I thought it was probably one of the best games of the season.
What would you what words would you use to characterize the Penguins under Mike Sullivan? Do you feel like they've played the same way through his entire tenure, or have you seen some adjustments made based on the personnel? Because they have the reputation of being a chip in charge type of team, a team that likes to get it up out of the defensive zone quickly, and a lot of times play indirect. That was so successful for them in their Stanley Cup runs in the first 2 years under Sullivan. I don't know if we've seen as much of that in the last couple of seasons. Maybe teams have caught up with it. Maybe teams have found a way to counter it. So where are the Penguins as far as on the spectrum of stylistic hockey? Are they still an up-tempo team as you watch them?
I think so. It's hard as a coach to completely change your stripes. So I don't think there's been any dramatic changes, I would say, over Sullivan's tenure, but I think he's done a really good job of adjusting with what they have. A lot of times that's injury dependent. And again, you're not going to be able to flip a system, within a season like that. If you're losing a couple of top guys, you kind of just got to plug and play. But I think you're seeing now with, shipping out Jack Johnson, with some of those turnover on the roster and getting defensemen in there that can be a bigger part of the play, that they're adjusting from just that chip, go deep, always kind of transition, play fast that way, a little bit more of a controlled game. And like I said, it was like that's at least especially what I saw today, taking advantage of a Caps team that, maybe had a little bit of, or didn't quite have their sea legs coming off of the break.
Let's talk goaltending since you brought it up. You disagree with my assessment. I thought Jari was big in the big moments, but clearly he has not been there as far as the raw results are concerned. Again, giving up 3 goals. I don't think he's allowed fewer than 3 all season, in fact. And the numbers aren't pretty. It's a save percentage well under 800. It's a goals against average in the stratosphere. Record okay, especially at home. But the Penguins were looking for more from him as they not really handed him the reins necessarily, as we're seeing. Mike Sullivan having no issue going to Casey DeSmith, who was mysteriously unavailable today. Not sure if that's an injury or what. Time of COVID, you have to wonder about that too. But how has Tristan Jarry performed differently to you compared to last year? Because he got on such a run, especially through January before Sullivan started working Murray back in. And then, of course, we had the COVID break. Perhaps Jarry hasn't played at the top of his game in about a year. So how is he different now when he's struggling, clearly, to keep pucks out?
Yeah, I was actually curious going into today's game with DeSmith not being available as a backup, if it might, you're never sure what conversations are had with the players, but if it might affect Jarry a little bit, knowing that he's probably not going to get pulled, even if he has a bad game, versus, when DeSmith has played a couple times in a row, you're not having a great season. There's a lot of internal pressure to maximize the opportunity so that you can get called on for the next game. I thought in the first period, and you saw it with a couple of the goals, his balance, I would not describe like his balance or calmness in the net as a strength of his necessarily. But you saw, especially on the first goal, that he was oversliding his post a little bit. On the second goal, he didn't have his feet set and wasn't really able to get out, and puck went off him. Even on that third goal, where Malkin didn't tie up Backstrom, he reacted late. He was deep in the net. And I just, by the third period, again, it was like there were less high danger scoring chances, I would say, and the Pens did a good job. And I think he did settle down as the game went on. You still saw moments where, his angle's off a little bit, where if the puck gets knocked down, he's not getting his feet down and getting back as well. And I think that that's just where a lot of the issues are coming for him, where the puck just barely sneaks by him. Or if there's a tip or a transition, he's not getting back to the fat part of the net as well. Today, or at this point, I don't know how much of it might be mental when you're not doing well and you're starting to hold the stick a little too tight and something like that. But I think that's the key to him getting back to his game, is getting out from the goal line a little bit more, and making sure that he's not overplaying pucks, especially when they're moving, outside of the dot lanes.
Yeah, always a delicate balance, pun not intended there, when it comes to being sharp as a goaltender, being aggressive but not too aggressive, and pursuing but not over pursuing. I suppose that's why they get paid the big bucks in this case. Jarry getting the extension, getting handed maybe not necessarily the one undisputed position, but at least coming into the year, we were looking for more from him, and I think it might be a psychological thing, because you look at his results and it's not like he's only giving up goals on high danger chances. It's also medium danger, low danger save percentage that's down for him. It's all down across the board. And yes, he's faced a pretty heavy workload compared to a lot of his peers, not quite Ottawa level where Matt Murray is getting shelled and also not performing terribly well. But here in Pittsburgh, Jarry's workload a little above average in terms of volume and quality against, but he's still very drastically underperforming what he, quote unquote, should. So that's a trouble spot to look to. I talked about defense and whether we would see Burke and Hextall look for some supplement there. Could goaltender be the biggest need for the Pens as they approach the trade deadline?
Yeah, with the defense, I think, again, unless they don't think they're going to get some of these injuries back at the end of the day, they have a lot of NHL caliber defensemen. You always want to try to get a little bit better. With goaltenders, I would be hard pressed to imagine that they're not at least exploring the option. I think what you have in Jarry and DeSmith, at least within this season, are two really good backup or 1B goalies. I don't know if DeSmith really has the pedigree to take that role for him. You got to hope that if given the opportunity, Jarry will step up a little bit. But I would imagine that they're definitely exploring any and all options to bring in somebody that could maybe slot in above them, or if one of them, or if Jarry especially, but if one of them just doesn't find their form, really actually compete or make it a little bit more of a competition between the two or the three at that point.
Head coach of Duquesne men's hockey, Conrad Waite, is my guest and co-host for today's Pittsburgh Postgame. And a reminder, our lines are open, so to speak, on YouTube. We have a couple of comments there, and we are broadcasting across the board. I'm going to check out Facebook here in just a moment. Let's do big picture, though, Conrad. The big news from the past week, with a lot of surprise attached to it, was the announcement of the new head of the hockey operations department with the Penguins. Not only was Ron Hextall hired as Jim Rutherford's replacement, so from goalie to goalie. The franchise has passed in that way, and a guy in Hextall who has some Pittsburgh background with his dad playing for the Pens back in the 70s. Ron was born here in town before, of course, becoming a star with the Flyers, GM position with the Flyers, ended up getting fired, but also credited with a lot of the success that young team has had, and a lot of people are very bullish on the Flyers within hockey because of some of that work, that talent identification work that Ron Hextall did in particular. But Brian Burke, I did not see that one coming. Conrad, I don't think anybody saw that one coming outside of Mario Lemieux and David Morehouse, who were doing the discussions there. Burke being consulted initially, unofficially maybe, by Morehouse and Lemieux on who they should hire as the GM, and they end up just bringing Berkey aboard as the head of hockey ops, as the team's new director of hockey operations, or president of hockey operations, whatever you want to call it. So I'm having a hard time pinpointing what this means, because Hextall's calling card, at least for his first tenure as a GM in the NHL, was patience. Like I said, he was a builder in Philadelphia. And then Brian Burke might be the most impatient person in the planet when he's been in management positions. So, boy, the mind boggles. What do you think this means for the Penguins as far as their direction is concerned? Do you think they'll behave differently? Because Morehouse still said they're in the win now mode, but I still feel like bringing in Hextall, at least as a tacit admission by the team, if not out loud, that it's time to start to shift gears at least a little bit here and start to pile up more assets and more draft picks, and in general start to plan for what happens after this run of championship contention. What say you on the matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think there were any even rumors out there about Burke being available or somebody being considered. So we were all pretty blindsided when they made the announcement. I think Hextall's strength is really in talent acquisition and development through the draft, and those kind of medium to long-term plans. I definitely think that putting him in that position is the Penguins acknowledging that their 3, 5, 6, 8-year plan needs to be of one to continue to acquire that young talent. Even while their window is open, we always talk about it might be 3, 4 years out whenever you have a good draft. But you have to have somebody for the very end of the Crosby era and for moving on from that point. So, I think that that's where Hextall's focus and strength is going to be. But I think it's fascinating bringing in somebody like Burke above him to share duties in some ways. I've seen a lot of reports of them talking about how, the managing an entire organization is not necessarily more than one person can handle, but there's a lot of different facets to it. And so I think they're gonna share some of the roles that way. Hextall was reported as a guy that didn't necessarily manage up, or a little bit quiet, wasn't as good of a communicator in that way. Burke certainly will never be accused of under communicating based on his history. And I think that what I find interesting is how many pundits talk about like a Brian Burke team. And my suspicions are that he's not going to have a significant impact on the players or the player acquisition or that direction of things, so much as maybe the behind the scenes or the outward facing for the Penguins. But we'll see. I was like, I think, like I said, I think it's probably a good decision. The Pens front office has become a lot smaller over the last couple of years and consolidated. And I think it was clearly a direction from the organization in whatever capacity that they wanted more people in that room to share the responsibilities. Yeah,
that's the one thing I really like about the move or moves is that you get more layers, you get more hockey minds in that front office. As you said, they lost some folks, Karmanos in particular, but Bill Guerin, Fitzgerald as well, the brain drain. Jason Botterill, I know he didn't do well in Buffalo, difficult situation up there, still underperformed, but I still think the Penguins were better served having him in that front office to talk about things. So with Burke there, providing another layer, as I said, between the hockey ops and the business side of things, and David Morehouse, I think, is a positive. Brian Burke, though, contains many contradictions. Harvard law educated, smart as they come, but also very combative when it comes to his points of view. That seems to be part of the fun for him, is the disagreements and the opinions and fighting for those. I have to admit, even though he's known as The guy who built the rough and tumble Ducks championship team of 2007, primarily the team that almost fought its way to a championship in a lot of ways. They were tough. They were difficult to play against in a very physical sense of the word. But he's also the guy who orchestrated the drafting of the Twins, the Daniel and Henrik Sedin in Vancouver. He's been a believer in star power, moved heaven and earth to get Phil Kessel in Toronto. He's not exactly a guy who's been known to be hard to play against in any sense of the word. So I don't know if there's a way to characterize Brian Burke at all, except he just believes strongly in what he believes in. And also the fact that even in the press conference the other day, the Zoom call with Ron Hextall, he deferred to Hextall on a question about the direction of the team. He said, hey, you're the GM, so you take it. So maybe that's a kind of an indication of where he might be positioning himself or how he might be setting himself up as far as the hierarchy and the decisions are made. I know one thing, Conrad, it's going to be interesting for all of us to watch because there's really no one more entertaining from the executive side of things than Brian Burke.
And I will say, without bad mouthing everyone, I think there were a lot of rumored seasoned people to be considered for the GM that I wouldn't have been nearly as excited about. Hextall was one of the people towards the top of my list. And for old school and everything that Brian Burke is, it's like, I don't think he's, what you would call a dinosaur. It's like, I don't think he's locked into only one type of hockey or anything like that. I think he's experienced for a good reason. And I think that he's probably strikes a good balance as a part of the management crew. I think you and a number of other people certainly talk about the fact that, like, the Penguins are built on star power. And when you get to executives, Brian Burke is probably one of the biggest star power executives out there. So, it's like, I think he fits the MO of, kind of the Penguins history. So
here's the toughest question for you before I let you go. Hey, we have a coach on the show. I'm going to take advantage of this. The Penguins power play. They got a goal today, and it was a more creative play than what we're used to seeing. It was Chris Letang finding a seam from center point, which was interesting, sliding it down to Brian Rust. Usually that's Sid if they're working that sort of a play. But Rust stops and pops from close range and gets the PPG, breaks an 0 for 21 string. We're all in agreement. The Penguins themselves are in agreement. They should be better on the power play than they have been the last couple of seasons, really since Phil Kessel left. I never would have thought that Phil Kessel would have been the fulcrum of a power play. I thought he'd be on the finishing end when he came to town in 2015, but he ended up being the guy that you wanted on his stick, not as the man shooting it on the power play, but as the guy setting things up. Since he left, it seems like they're lost in that regard, and it seems like they're predictable in a lot of ways. So is there any kind of thought or brainstorm that you've had about the Pens power play that might lead to some better results? Because we talk about the Stars needing to be better. A lot of that goes hand in hand with the power play needing to be better for this team to perform what we were hoping they were going to do coming into this season.
Yeah, I think the tough thing with the power play is you're always kind of balancing out players being comfortable, which is a lot of conversation about, Crosby and Malkin kind of wanting to be in the same spot. And when you're too comfortable in a power play, it's static. You move the puck. The penalty kill can always kind of fill the lanes, and you never create anything. Or really pushing that react. But the less comfortable you are, especially as a talented player, you're more maybe apt to make a mistake, or lanes don't open up as much for you. You kind of have to work the yin and the yang there. I thought today the puck movement, especially on I think their first power play, showed some real good signs, versus what we're used to seeing of the Penguins. And I mean, I think on that first power play at one point, Malkin was middle point and Letang was playing off the left wall. We saw a lot of just flow around the whole zone that resulted in opening and people being in positions that we're not used to seeing them with, especially in a Pens power play, and opening up lanes there. And then finally, obviously they scored the goal there. And as you said, it was with Rust in a spot that maybe we're used to seeing Crosby or something else. So I think if they can, if you can continue to push players that are in their mid-30s, scored hundreds of goals, it's like to be able to flow a little bit, let the puck do the work for them. I think that's where they'll keep getting the chances. Because I think the 5 guys they have on that unit right now are all smart and talented enough to be able to work that kind of a system. And I think you saw some good results out of it today.
I have no doubt that's the toughest part of Mike Sullivan's job is pushing these guys enough to get them into spots where they can be a little uncomfortable, because otherwise you're just going to have the same stagnant look, and you're going to have teams prepping for that. I'm optimistic because Todd Reardon is back in the fold, and I like the first few games of puck movement, body movement, flow, as you characterized it there, Conrad, and then they fell back into old habits, it seemed. But today against the Capitals, and a big game on national TV. I was going to say a divisional game, but they're all divisional games this year. I got to get used to this, but not too used to it, because hopefully we're going back to a normal by the time next fall rolls around. But yeah, power play is going to be a huge thing to keep track of. Special teams in general turned out to be a positive overall for the Penguins today. They beat the Caps 6-3, their first regulation win in a while, just their second of the season, their first by multi-goals on the entire year. First time they played with the lead going into the third period. Lots of firsts, and they got the job done for, as I mentioned, win number 7. They're back into a tie, at least, for a playoff spot with many, many games to go. And most of those all of them, in fact, against the Capitals and Islanders as we close out the month of February. We're going to see a lot of those two teams. So a totally different field of this season. And, well, the teams are going to know each other very well by the time we get to the start of May. We know that much. Conrad, what about Duquesne before I let you go? Because I know that some club teams have closed it down. They're not going to play this spring. You said still up in the air, though, for the Dukes?
Yeah, so in our local league, I think half the teams have shut it down for the year. It's just tough at the ACHA level to be able to come up with the finance, the money available to do regular testing. All schools aren't necessarily treating it the way you might with the NCAA. So I think 4 of the 8 teams in our league are shut down for this spring. 2 or 3 of them are planning or hoping to play at this point, and we're still working with the university with a return to play plan to hopefully get on the ice. We haven't had the official decision for the semester yet, but coming off the beginning of winter break, or the beginning of the winter semester, dealing with still winter numbers up, those kind of things. We're all trying to be as safe and smart as possible, but we're hoping to get something in, especially for our seniors here that have been such a big part of our program for the last 3 years.
Coming up on a year of this stuff. It's it's frustrating, but again, the precautions are necessary, as we've seen with the numbers and the grim statistics that have again reared their heads here through the winter time. And we're hoping, knock on wood, we get to spring and things start to open up. But if you do play, we'll be watching closely. DUQ Hockey on Twitter is how you can follow the team. And it's been Conrad Waite as my co-host here on Pittsburgh Postgame. Thanks so much. I really appreciate the time. You being generous with your insight on the sport we all love so much.
Thank you so much, and happy Valentine's Day shout out to my wife who let me do this today with you. Thank you.
Yeah, to my wife too. Well, the grandparents are over watching both the boys at the moment, so she's not by herself, thank goodness, downstairs as we have a little fun here. Appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon. All right, that's Conrad Waite, again, of Duquesne Hockey. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss any of your comments on Facebook. We have Ken Bakewell saying ho, and he just has a very simple and I think very popular insight. Great as usual, says Ken, to beat the Caps. This had a feel of one of those old Penguins-Caps games like we were talking about at the top of the show, where it was chance for chance. And like Conrad said, maybe not so much the fact that Peter Laviolette is now coaching the Caps, a more aggressive coach than Barry Trotz and probably Todd Reardon too. But also that these teams haven't played a ton of hockey lately. And there was all this speculation going into the season. What's the hockey going to look like with limited practice, limited training camp? I thought offenses would reign early, and I think we're starting to see that more now, ironically, as we get a little bit deeper into the season. I thought everyone was rusty early, to be honest. Goaltenders, defensemen, forwards, from attack to defense, both sides of the puck. I thought we saw less than NHL caliber play for much of those early games. Now it feels like the offense has an edge, and you look across the league, in most games, you're seeing 3 and 4 goals on both sides of the ledger, and I think hockey's healthier when there are more goals, let alone scoring chances. I think that goals going in, seeing the red light turn on, as simple as that sounds, is always key. I'm not talking about lacrosse scores. I don't need 11-9, although once in a while might be fun. But a game like today, 6-3, I feel like that should be an average NHL score, and I'd be very happy with that. Again, on YouTube, we have Walt Flanagan saying sorry for the late join. Good win with bad moments. I mentioned the Malkin turnover late in the second period. That felt like, oh no, they're going to do this again, where they can't hold a lead for longer than a couple of minutes. And of course, they did cough up the 2-1 lead, where they couldn't beat Vanacek, the Caps' de facto backup goalie right now, as they're trying to get Samsonov back to health. He played for Hershey of the AHL today, I thought I saw on Twitter, in fact. So it won't be Vanacek's net for very much longer. You saw the veteran Craig Anderson on the bench for the Caps, but they're going with the youngster, at least right now, from overseas. And, of course, Ilya Samsonov is the present and the future for the Caps at that position. So the next time we see the Caps, maybe even on Tuesday night at PPG Paints Arena, which is the Pens' next game, it'll probably be Samsonov in goal. And I guess we'll find out about DeSmith. Maybe we already have. I'm doing this live. I can't track the Mike Sullivan press conference. He wasn't asked about DeSmith's mysterious unavailability prior to this game by reporters, but we'll give them a break there. It's not exactly terribly pressing because you have Tristan Jarry trying to work his way back to form. I thought maybe a half step forward for Tristan, even though the numbers aren't going to look like it. Walt also says, Letang, this ain't it, Chief, as far as his continued struggles with reading the play. It's weird with Letang. It feels like his mental game is degrading as he gets older. Typically, you get older and you get smarter, or at least you get more effective at recognizing patterns. That's the truth for all of us in life. That's the benefit of experience, right? We might lose something off of our fastball, so to speak, physically, but mentally, we're able to make up for that, maybe even more so, and cover up and make it even more of a positive than it ever was as we get along in years. For athletes, that's what you count on. In a fast-paced sport like hockey that's so physically demanding, you need to be able to have a good head on your shoulders. That's why Conrad, for instance, talking about Sid maybe losing some pop off his stride, but honestly, even though he doesn't skate like McDavid or McKinnon or Matthews at this moment, he still can control the game because he has the opponents on a string. I thought he was spectacular today as far as being in rhythm. He looks like midseason form Crosby now. But you have guys like Letang and Malkin who still aren't seeing and feeling the game like we're used to doing, like we're used to seeing, I should say. Sorry, I was distracted. Another comment from Walt Flanagan on the upcoming snowstorm. Yes, winter continues on. He says, for all those back in Pittsburgh grousing about the snow, it's been raining for the past 3 days in North Carolina. Yeah, I like the snow. I'm one of the few in this area who cheers it on. I would love to see a foot. And I'm even doing a part-time job right now where I'm delivering. I'm driving a van out in these streets and trudging through snow and drifts and slush and grime and really putting a workout on my boots. But I just think it's a nice, different look. Winter is long and dark without snow. If it's going to be long and dark, at least make it a little bit pretty to look at from time to time. Although I understand if you have a job where you commute a lot or you have to get kids off to school, hey, I got to get kids off to daycare. But I've always been one who likes the snow. So sue me. Maybe that's why I'm a winter sports fan. Maybe that's why I'm a big hockey fan. That's why it's my number one game to follow. This was an outstanding game to follow. A lot of fun on a Sunday afternoon. I think it's just terrific that we're able to get back to hockey here. The Penguins played basically 2 games in 2 weeks. So not a lot of fun there, but now it's about to pick up. And as I mentioned to Conrad before he went, there are plenty of games to come before the end of February, and they're all against the Capitals and the Islanders. So get ready to see some red, white, and blue and some blue and orange. Dave Gormley chimes in on Facebook. He says, Casey DeSmith is sick, but not COVID-related. Dan Kingerski, who was on site at PPG Paints Arena, had the report there. So there you go. Last bit of news. Heaven forbid we get some news to go with the opinion and analysis here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. This has been Pittsburgh Postgame. Thank you so much for watching. We'll endeavor to have more and more Penguins content, including my net front presence coming up this week. A new edition talking about Brian Burke and the one thing that I think he's definitely gotten right since arriving in Pittsburgh. For Conrad Waite of Duquesne Hockey, this has been Matt Gajtka saying good night and God bless. We'll talk to you next time on Pittsburgh Sports Live.